Chapter 8, Confronting Marginalization. In the previous chapter, we read about two different groups and their experiences of inequality and discrimination. Though powerless, such groups have fought, protested, and struggled against being excluded or dominated by others. They have attempted to overcome their situation by adopting a range of strategies in their long history. Religious solace, armed struggle, self improvement, and education, economic uplift. There appears to be no one way of doing things. In all cases, the choice of struggle has depended on the circumstances that the marginalized find themselves in. In this chapter, we will read about some of the ways in which groups and individuals challenge existing inequalities. Adivasis, Dalits, Muslim, women, and other marginal groups argue that simply by being citizen of a democratic country, they possess equal rights that must be respected. Many among them look up to the Constitution to address their concerns. In this chapter, we will see why the Constitution of India is something that marginalized groups invoke in the course of their struggles. As part of this, we will look at how rights are translated into laws to protect groups from continued exploitation, and we will also look at the government's effort to formulate policies to promote the access of these groups to development. Invoking fundamental rights. The Constitution, as you have learned in the first chapter of this book, lays down the principles that make our society and polity democratic. They are defined in and through the list of fundamental rights that are an important part of the Constitution. These rights are available to all Indians equally. As far as the marginalized are concerned, they have drawn on these rights in two ways. First, by insisting on their fundamental rights, they have forced the government to recognize the injustice done to them. Second, they have insisted that the government enforce these laws. In some instances, the struggles of the marginalized have influenced the government to frame new laws. In keeping with the spirit of the fundamental rights, Article 17 of the Constitution states that untouchability has been abolished. What this means is that no one can henceforth prevent Dalits from educating themselves, entering temples, using public facilities, etc. It also means that it is wrong to practice untouchability and that this practice will not be tolerated by a democratic government. In fact, untouchability is a punishable crime now. There are other sections in the Constitution that help to strengthen the argument against untouchability. For example, Article 15 of the Constitution notes that no citizen of India shall be discriminated against on the basis of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. You learned a lot about this in your class 7 textbook in the chapter on equality. This has been used by Dalits to seek equality where it has been denied to them. Therefore, Dalits can invoke or draw on a fundamental rights in situations where they feel that they have been treated badly by some individual or community or even by the government. They have drawn the attention of the Government of India to the Constitution, demanding that the government abide by it and do justice to them. Likewise, other minority groups have drawn on the fundamental rights sections of our Constitution. They have particularly drawn upon the right to freedom of religion and cultural and educational rights. In the case of cultural and educational rights, distinct cultural and religious groups like the Muslims and Parsis have the right to be the guardians of the content of their culture, as well as the right to make decisions on how best this content is to be preserved. Thus, by granting different forms of cultural rights, the Constitution tries to ensure cultural justice to such groups. The Constitution does this so that the culture of these groups is not dominated nor wiped out by the culture of the majority community. Laws for the marginalized. As you have read, the government makes laws to protect its citizens. Yet this is not the only way in which it takes actions. There are specific laws and policies for the marginalized in our country. There are policies or schemes that emerge through other means like setting up a committee or by undertaking a survey, etc. The government then makes an effort to promote such policies in order to give opportunities to specific groups, promoting social justice. As part of their effort to implement the Constitution, both state and central government create a specific scheme for implementation in tribal areas or in areas that have a high Dalit population. For example, the government provides for free or subsidies hostels for students of Dalit and Adivasis communities so that they can avail of education facilities that may not be available in their localities. In addition to providing certain facilities, the government also operates through laws to ensure that concrete steps are taken to end inequality in the system. One such law policy is the reservation policy that today is both significant and highly contentious. The law, which reserves seats in education and government employment for Dalits and Adivasis, are based on an important argument that in a society like ours, where for centuries sections of the population have been denied opportunities to learn and to work in order to develop new skills or vocations, a democratic government needs to step in and assist these sections. How does the reservation policy work? Governments across India have their own list of scheduled castes or the list scheduled tribes and backward and most backward caste. The central government too has its list. Students applying to educational institutions and those applying for posts in government are expected to furnish proof of their caste or tribe status in the form of caste and tribe certificate. Many government and educational institutes also ask for candidates to mention their caste tribe status. If a particular Dalit caste or a certain tribe is on the government list, then a candidate from that caste or tribe can avail of the benefit of reservation. For admission to colleges, especially to institutes of professional education, such a medical college government defines a set of cutoff marks. This means that not all Dalit and tribal candidates can qualify for admission, but only those who have done reasonably well and secured marks above the cutoff point. Government also offer special scholarship for these students. In your class 6 political science textbook, you will read more on reservation for the backward classes, protecting the rights of Dalits and Adivasis. In addition to policies, our country also has specific laws that guard against the discrimination and exploitation of the marginalized communities. Let us read the following case study adapted from a real life account to understand how Dalits use the protection that laws provide. The villagers of Jakmalpur are gearing up for a big festival. Once in 5 years, the local deity is honored and priests from 20 neighboring villages come for this 5-day event. The ceremony begins with a member of the Dalit community washing the feet of all the priests and then bathing in the water used for this. In Jakmalpur, the person who performed this task belonged to Ratnam's family. His family and grandfather had both performed the same task before him. Though they were never allowed to enter the temple, this ritual was viewed as a great honor bestowed on them on this special occasion. Now it was Ratnam's turn. Ratnam was all of 20 years studying engineering in a nearby college. He refused to perform the ritual. He said that he had no faith in this practice and that his family members were forced to perform this ritual because they were Dalit. Ratnam's refusal angered both the powerful castes in the village and some families from his own community. The powerful castes were shocked that such a young boy had the guts to refuse. They believed that it was Ratnam's education which allowed him to imagine that he could start comparing himself with them. Those from Ratnam's own caste were fearful of angering the powerful. Many worked on their fields as daily wage laborers. If the dominant caste decided to not call them, then what would they earn? How would they survive? They also declared that the wrath of the local deity would strike them if they refused to give in. Ratnam argued that given that not a single Dalit had ever entered the temple, how could the deity be angry with them? The powerful castes decided to teach Ratnam's a lesson. His community was ordered to ostracize him and his family, and everyone was told that no one should speak or do any work for them or with them. One night, some men entered their part of the village and set his hut on fire. He managed to escape with his mother Ratnam, then went to file a case in the local police station under the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989. Other Dalits families still did not come out in his support as they were scared that a similar fate might await them if they spoke out. The case was picked up by the local media that led to many journalists visiting the village. Ratnam was written about as a symbol of Dalit action. The ritual was called off, but his family was forced to move out. They continued to be ostracized by the powerful castes in the village. The Scheduled Caste and the Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989. Ratnam sought the support of law, filing his complaint under the above act to protest against the domination and violence of the powerful castes in his village. This act was framed in 1989 in response to demands made by Dalit and others that the government must take seriously. The ill treatment and humiliation Dalits and tribal groups face in an everyday sense. While such treatment had persisted for a long time, it had acquired a violent character in the late 1970s and 1980s. During this period, in parts of southern India, a number of assertive Dalit groups came into being and asserted their rights. They refused to perform their so-called caste duties and insisted on being treated equally like Ratnam. They refused to follow practices located in the humiliation and exploitation of Dalits. This resulted in the more powerful castes unleashing violence against them in order to indicate to the government that untouchability was still being practiced, and in the most hideous manner. Dalit groups demanded new laws that would list the various sorts of violence against Dalit and prescribe stringent punishment for those who indulge in them. Likewise, throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Adivasi people successfully organized themselves and demanded equal rights and for their land and resources to be returned to them. They too had to face the anger of powerful social groups and were subject to a great deal of violence. This is why this act contains a very long list of crimes, some of which are too horrible even to contemplate. The act does not only describe terrible crimes but also lets people know what dreadful deeds human beings are capable of. In this sense, laws such as these seek to both punish as well as influence the way we think and act. The Act distinguishes several levels of crimes. Firstly, it lists modes of humiliation that are both physically horrific and morally reprehensible, and seeks to punish those who force a member of scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe to drink or eat any inedible or obnoxious substance, forcibly removes clothes from the person of a member of a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe, or parades him on her neck or with painted face or body, or commits any similar act which is derogatory to human dignity. Secondly, it lists actions that disposes Dalit and Adivasis of their meager resources or which force them into performing slave labor. Thus, the Act sets out to punish anyone who wrongfully occupies or cultivates any lands owned by or allotted to a member of a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe, or gets the land allotted to whom transferred. At another level, the Act recognizes that crimes against Dalit and tribal women are of a specific kind and therefore seeks to penalize anyone who assaults or uses force on any woman belonging to a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe with intent to dishonor her. Adivasi demands and the 1989 Act. The 1989 Act is important for another reason. Adivasi activists refer to it to defend their rights to occupy land that was traditionally theirs. As you read in the previous chapter, Adivasis are often unwilling to move from their land and are forcibly displaced. Activists have asked that those who have forcibly encroached upon tribal lands should be punished under this law. They have also pointed to the fact that this act merely confirms what has already been promised to tribal people in the constitution, that land belonging to tribal people cannot be sold to or bought by non-tribal people. In case where this has happened, the constitution guarantees the right of tribal people to repossess their land. C.K. Janu, an Adivasi activist, has also pointed out that one of the violators of constitutional rights guarantees to tribal people are governments in the various states of India, for it is they who allow non-tribal encroachers in the form of timber merchants, paper mills, etc., to exploit tribal lands and to forcibly evict tribal people from their traditional forests in the process of declaring forests as reserved or as sanctuaries. She has also noted that in cases where tribals have already been evicted and cannot go back to their lands, they must be compensated. That is, the government must draw up plans and policies for them to live and work elsewhere. After all, governments spend large sums of money on building industrial or other projects on land taken from tribals, so why should they be reluctant to spend even very modest amount on rehabilitating the displaced? Conclusion. As we can see, the existence of a right or a law or even a policy on paper does not mean that it exists in reality. People have had to constantly work on or make efforts to translate these into principles that guide the actions of their fellow citizens or even their leaders. The desire for equality, dignity, and respect is not new. It has existed in different forms throughout our history, as you have seen in the chapter. Similarly, even in a democratic society, similar processes of struggle, writing, negotiation, and organizing need to continue.